It started like any other quiet Saturday morning until I walked out to my driveway and realized the padlock on my gate had been cut clean through. My heart sank when I saw the empty spot where my black Jeep Rubicon used to sit. The same Jeep I'd owned for years, maintained religiously, and parked exactly where it always belonged. At first I thought it was stolen by some random thief. But then I noticed something that made my blood boil. The HOA tow notice fluttering on my fence, signed by none other than Karen Whitmore, our beloved HOA president. That woman had warned me before about unsightly vehicles. But cutting my lock and stealing my Jeep, that was a whole new level of crazy. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that my Jeep wasn't just an ordinary car. It was part of an active police task force operation. And by taking it, she had just committed a federal crime without even realizing it. Before we dive into this wild story, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more unbelievable HOA drama stories. Before all of this madness began, life in Clearwater Estates was at least on the surface peaceful. The streets were lined with freshly trimmed hedges, white mailboxes all perfectly identical, and lawns so obsessively maintained that even the weeds seemed afraid to grow. The HOA took pride in order and perfection, which was ironic considering how rotten it actually was beneath that glossy surface. I moved here about 5 years ago after retiring from the police force. My name's Mike Thompson. I'm 46, a mechanical engineer now, though once upon a time I wore the badge. I'd had my fill of late-night stakeouts, adrenaline spikes, and watching criminals slip through the cracks of bureaucracy. So I bought this house with the idea that I'd finally have peace, a nice yard, a workshop, and the freedom to tinker with engines without anyone breathing down my neck. That was before Karen Whitmore came along. Karen was the kind of woman who thought her clipboard was a weapon, and her title HOA president was divine authority. She strutted around in pastel suits, pearls glinting in the Arizona sun, a permanent frown plastered beneath her wide-brimmed hat. If she wasn't writing up someone for leaving a trash bin out too long, she was sneaking around with her camera snapping evidence of any minor infraction she could twist into a rule violation. And somehow she had decided that I was her personal nemesis. It started small, a friendly reminder about repainting my mailbox, then a warning about unapproved materials on my fence. I brushed them off with polite replies at first, until the letters turned into fines, and the fines turned into threats. She claimed my Jeep Rubicon was an eyesore because it had off-road mud splatters on the tires. Yes, mud. In Arizona. I laughed when I got that letter, thinking she had to be joking. But when I saw her standing outside my property with her phone up, taking pictures of my driveway like it was a crime scene, I knew she wasn't kidding. "Morning, Karen," I said through the gate, coffee in hand. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she replied, forcing a tight smile. "I just wanted to remind you that all vehicles parked outside the designated garage space must comply with HOA aesthetic standards." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean being a Jeep?" She pursed her lips. "Being unsightly. It lowers the visual appeal of the neighborhood." "I'll keep that in mind," I said, and shut the gate. Of course I didn't move the Jeep. Why would I? It was parked neatly inside my property line behind my own locked gate. But from that day forward, she began a crusade. Every week another letter, another fine. Another photo slipped into my mailbox with a note about non-compliance. The Jeep wasn't just a vehicle to me, it was part of my past. Back when I was still with the task force, we'd modified it for covert operations, bulletproof panels, hidden GPS trackers, and a small onboard surveillance system disguised as a dash cam. I'd kept most of the equipment inactive after retirement, but one tracker, the primary one, remained online. Old habits die hard. What Karen didn't know was that the Jeep had recently been reactivated for a special purpose. My old colleague Lieutenant Ben Carter had reached out a few weeks earlier. His unit was investigating a drug smuggling route that moved through several small Arizona towns. He'd asked if he could temporarily use my Jeep's built-in tracking system for mobile observation. It didn't require me to do anything, just keep the Jeep parked in a visible place to blend in as a resident vehicle. I agreed, knowing it might help catch a few bad guys. It was harmless. Until Karen decided to make it personal. One evening, I caught her arguing with another resident outside the community center. Her voice carried across the lawn like a foghorn. "I don't care who he used to be," she snapped. "If the rules say no dirty vehicles, then he's breaking the rules. It's that simple." The resident, a retired Army vet named Carl, tried to calm her down. "Karen, come on. It's just a Jeep. You're gonna give yourself a stroke." She pointed a manicured finger toward my house. If we let one person slide, the whole system collapses. Next thing you know, people will start parking boats, RVs, tractors, chaos. I remember chuckling when I overheard that. Chaos, huh? She had no idea what chaos actually looked like. But things escalated fast. The next morning, I found a letter taped to my front door. Final notice, it read in bold. Failure to comply will result in the removal of your vehicle by HOA enforcement or authorized contractors. I nearly spit out my coffee laughing. HOA enforcement. What was she going to do, call the neighborhood watch? I was scheduled to be out of town for 2 days for a mechanical project in Flagstaff. I thought about locking the Jeep in the garage, but a part of me wanted to see just how far Karen was willing to go. So I left it parked where it was clean, polished, and perfectly within property limits. When I returned late Friday night, I noticed something strange. My gate latch looked off. The padlock seemed newer, shinier. Someone had replaced it. I felt that cold, unmistakable rush of police instinct. Something wasn't right. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my spare key. Of course, it didn't fit. The original lock was gone. By morning, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. The Jeep was missing. Completely gone. At first, I thought maybe Ben's task force had moved it without telling me. But when I checked my phone app for the GPS tracker, I saw the signal still within the neighborhood about a half-mile away. The Jeep hadn't been stolen by criminals. It had been towed. And the HOA tow notice pinned to my fence told me exactly who had done it, Karen Whitmore. She'd actually gone and cut the lock to my private property, hired a tow truck, and ordered them to haul away a federally tracked vehicle under the claim of community beautification. I stood there in my driveway for a long time, silent, staring at the empty space where the Jeep had Saturday. Then a slow smile crept across my face. Because if Karen thought she'd just humiliated me, she was about to learn what real consequences looked like. I pulled out my phone, opened the GPS tracker, and began tracing her every move. It was time for a little lesson in accountability. If there's one thing I've learned from years in law enforcement, it's that people who crave control always go too far. Karen Whitmore was no exception. She'd spent years bullying her neighbors into submission until now. Cutting through a steel lock to steal a man's car wasn't just another HOA overreach. It was a crime. I started that morning by walking to the HOA's community office, a small stucco building with a private board members only sign on the door. Karen was there, of course, perched behind a desk like a queen on her throne, sipping coffee from a mug that said, "Because I'm the president." When she saw me, her eyebrows arched in mock surprise. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, back from your little trip, are you?" I stayed calm. "Yeah, got back late last night. Funny thing, my Jeep seems to be missing." Karen set her mug down with deliberate slowness. Yes, we had to take action. That vehicle was in violation of Section 14B of our community guidelines, unsightly, unauthorized, and improperly parked for more than 48 hours. I stared at her, amused. "You cut my lock, entered private property, and had my vehicle towed. That's not enforcement, Karen, that's breaking and entering." Her smile tightened. "Let's not get dramatic, Mr. Thompson. The HOA has authority to ensure community standards are upheld. On common property, maybe. My driveway isn't common property." "Oh, semantics." She waved her hand dismissively. "If you just followed the rules, this wouldn't have happened." There it was. That smug, righteous tone that made my blood simmer. "Where's my Jeep now?" I asked. She folded her arms. "In the HOA impound lot. And it will remain there until you pay your outstanding fines and towing fees." I let out a slow exhale and gave a small nod. "Got it. One more question." "Yes, did you happen to notice any strange wires or devices inside the vehicle?" Her expression flickered for half a second before she recovered. "Wires? No. Why would I?" "Just curious," I said with a faint smirk. "You might want to avoid touching anything. It's sensitive equipment," Karen scoffed. "Nice try, Mr. Thompson. Threats won't work here." I smiled wider. Not a threat, just advice. Then I turned and left. As soon as I got home, I opened the tracking app again. The Jeep was stationary about half a mile away, exactly where Karen said it was. But what made me smile was the blinking alert on my secondary tracker. The Jeep's door sensors had been triggered an hour earlier. Someone had entered it. That someone was about to regret it. You see, that Jeep wasn't just connected to my phone. It was still registered under a federal equipment ID for the Narcotics Interdiction Task Force. That meant any tampering automatically pinged a secure server monitored by law enforcement. I picked up the phone and called my old friend Lieutenant Ben Carter. "Ben," I said, "we might have a situation." He recognized my tone immediately. "What kind of situation? Remember the Jeep you were using for passive tracking?" "Yeah, Don't tell me. Oh, I'll tell you. My HOA president decided to enforce neighborhood rules by cutting my lock and towing it away. Ben swore under his breath. You're kidding. I wish I was. They've got it parked in some HOA storage lot. Someone already opened the doors. All right, he said sharply. Don't do anything yet. I'll get a unit to check it out quietly. If the equipment's been tampered with, that's federal property interference. I grinned. I figured you'd say that. Want me to send the GPS coordinates? Send them now, Ben replied. And Mike, don't confront her again. Let us handle it. I hung up feeling that old familiar rush of adrenaline I hadn't felt since my days on the force. Justice was coming, and this time I didn't even have to get my hands dirty. But I couldn't resist doing a bit of digging of my own. That afternoon I went for a walk through the neighborhood. People were out trimming hedges, walking dogs, pretending not to gossip. I overheard snippets of conversation near the clubhouse. Did you hear Karen had that guy's Jeep hauled off? Yeah, poor guy. She said it was a security hazard. I heard she's going to use it for HOA patrols or something. HOA patrols, I nearly burst out laughing. The image of Karen driving around in my old Rubicon, pretending to be some sort of neighborhood cop, was too good. But when I reached the small fenced-in lot near the tennis courts, the laughter stopped. There it was, my Jeep dusty but intact. A notice of seizure was taped to the windshield. Beside it, Karen and two of her board members stood talking with a man in a tow truck uniform. I stayed behind a hedge listening. So can we start it? Karen asked. The tow driver shrugged. I wouldn't mess with it, ma'am. That's a heavy-duty setup. Looks like police-grade electronics. Karen laughed dismissively. Oh, please. He probably installed fake gadgets to look important. Just start it. The driver hesitated. If it's got GPS tracking, that could be trouble. I am the HOA president, she snapped. We're allowed to inspect any vehicle stored on community property. Now start the engine. I shook my head in disbelief. She was actually doubling down. The driver reluctantly reached through the window, and the Jeep roared to life. The moment he did, the silent alarm went off, an internal system linked directly to Ben's task force. Within seconds, my phone buzzed. Alert: unauthorized ignition detected. Task force notified. I could barely suppress a grin. Karen clapped her hands in satisfaction. See, nothing to worry about. We'll repaint it, put HOA decals, maybe use it for neighborhood patrols. Repaint it, I muttered under my breath. Perfect. Add vandalism to your list. I walked back home, sat on my porch, and cracked open a cold beer. The sun was dipping low, casting long orange shadows across the street. Everything felt strangely calm, like the quiet before a storm. About 20 minutes later, I heard them. Sirens. Not one, but several. Deep, throaty, official. They echoed down the hill, growing louder until black SUVs and unmarked cruisers turned the corner. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains as the vehicles screeched to a halt outside the tennis courts. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. The cavalry had arrived. And somewhere behind that chain-link fence, Karen Whitmore was about to have the most educational day of her life. The neighborhood hadn't seen that many flashing lights since the 4th of July parade. Except this time, they weren't red, white, and blue for celebration. They were federal issue, sharp and serious, slicing through the Arizona morning air. From my front porch, I watched as unmarked black SUVs and police trucks rolled up to the HOA lot, dust swirling behind their tires. Agents in tactical vests poured out, some in plain clothes, others wearing jackets that read Federal Task Force. Karen, of course, was right in the middle of it all, arms crossed, looking utterly confused and outraged, like someone who couldn't fathom why reality wasn't bending to her will. I grabbed my cap, put on my sunglasses, and strolled casually down the sidewalk, coffee mug in hand. The closer I got, the clearer it was that chaos had arrived. Ma'am, step away from the vehicle, one of the officers barked. Karen huffed. Excuse me, who do you think you're talking to? I'm the HOA president. That's great, the officer said flatly. Step back anyway. Her hands went to her hips. This is our impound lot. You can't just barge in here. A tall man stepped forward. Lieutenant Ben Carter, looking every bit the part of the federal hammer about to drop. He spotted me instantly, gave a subtle nod, then turned to Karen. Ma'am, this vehicle is registered under an active federal investigation, he said calmly. It's been unlawfully tampered with and relocated from secured private property. Karen blinked rapidly. What are you talking about? That car was abandoned. It was an eyesore. I was enforcing community policy. Ben tilted his head. Did you personally authorize the removal? Of course I did. It's my responsibility to keep the neighborhood safe. Ben smiled faintly. Well, congratulations. You just interfered with a federal sting operation. The color drained from her face. I'm sorry, what? At that moment, I couldn't resist stepping in. I leaned casually against the fence. He means, Karen, that you just stole evidence from the federal government. But hey, at least the HOA looks aesthetically consistent now, right? She spun toward me, her face flushing a deep shade of crimson. You, she hissed. You set me up. Set you up, I laughed softly. You literally cut my lock and stole my car. I was just watching. Ben glanced at me with amusement, then gestured to his team. Secure the vehicle. Photograph everything. Within seconds, agents surrounded the Jeep, snapping pictures and marking spots with evidence flags. One officer popped the driver's door and carefully retrieved the surveillance equipment hidden under the dashboard. Confirmed, he called out. Device tampered. Someone's tried to remove it. Karen's jaw dropped. That's ridiculous. I didn't touch anything. Ben raised an eyebrow. We have fingerprints, ma'am. And a video feed. She blinked. A video feed. Yes, ma'am, he said evenly. That unsightly camera you were mocking earlier, it's been recording the entire time. Including when you gave the tow order and when your board member tried to open the glove box. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For once, she was speechless. The other HOA members standing nearby, Mr. Jenkins, the treasurer, and Mrs. Green, the secretary, looked like they were about to melt into the asphalt. Jenkins stammered, "We didn't know. She said it was approved procedure," Karen snapped. "Don't you dare throw me under the bus." Tom Ben crossed his arms. "This isn't an HOA dispute anymore. It's a federal matter. You're all going to need to come with us for questioning." Karen gasped. "You can't arrest me. This is outrageous." Ben gave her a calm, almost sympathetic look. "You're not being arrested yet. But if you resist, that might change." I nearly choked on my coffee, trying not to laugh. Neighbors had begun gathering along the sidewalk, whispering and pointing. Phones were out, cameras rolling. Karen's once flawless reputation was unraveling in 4 Kelvin's resolution. Mrs. Green looked like she might faint. Jenkins muttered something about calling his lawyer. But Karen, ever the drama queen, decided to put on a show. "This is harassment," she screamed. "You're making a huge mistake. I'll have your badges for this." Ben looked over at me, deadpan. "She's definitely got that HOA energy, huh?" I shrugged. "Full dose." Karen's tirade continued as 2 uniformed officers gently guided her toward the edge of the lot. "You can't do this. I'm the one keeping this neighborhood from falling apart. You think people like him," she jabbed a finger toward me, "deserve special treatment just because they're friends with the police." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny thing about the law, Karen, it applies to everyone. Even you." That shut her up for half a second. Ben stepped closer to me and spoke quietly. "We'll take it from here. But I need to debrief you later. This vehicle's now official evidence." "Of course," I said. "Do whatever you need." He gave me a knowing grin. "You've still got that sense for justice, Mike. Always did." "Justice," I replied, watching Karen get handcuffed for interfering with an active investigation, has a sense of humor too. By the time they loaded the Jeep onto a flatbed to transport it back to the federal compound, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. Karen's meltdown had gone viral. One of the teens down the street had uploaded the footage with the caption, "HOA president gets owned by FBI." By evening, it had hundreds of thousands of views. Later that night, I sat on my porch again, nursing a drink as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. I could still see the faint outlines of tire tracks where the Jeep had been parked. The air felt lighter somehow, like the neighborhood had collectively exhaled. A few neighbors walked by. Carl from across the street gave me a thumbs up. "Heard the feds took your Jeep and our dear president." "You okay?" I smiled. "Never better." "Guess she won't be issuing any more citations for lawn length, huh?" "Not unless her cellmate's got a front yard," I said. We both laughed, and for the first time in months I felt peace return to Clearwater Estates. But I knew it wasn't over yet. Not completely. HOA drama never ends cleanly. There's always one more meeting, one more hearing, one more ego desperate to prove it was right. Still, as the sky faded to twilight and the hum of cicadas filled the air, I leaned back and thought to myself, maybe, just maybe, this time karma had arrived right on schedule. And for once, I didn't even have to lift a finger. By the next morning, Clearwater Estates was a different place. The HOA office sat empty, its door taped shut with a bright orange federal investigation in progress notice. The manicured lawns and perfect mailboxes suddenly looked less like a sign of order and more like props from a movie set hiding the chaos underneath. Word spread faster than wildfire. Some neighbors were shocked. Others, frankly, delighted. For years, Karen had lorded over everyone like a queen with a rulebook. Now she was the talk of every porch, every coffee shop, every Facebook group within the county. I stayed quiet, let them speculate. I had no intention of boasting, even though part of me enjoyed watching the empire crumble. Still, I wanted to make sure she learned her lesson properly. Around noon, I got a call from Ben Carter. "She's not taking it well," he said, his tone laced with dry humor. "I can imagine," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "She's been yelling about abuse of power and demanding her HOA lawyers. The funny part, her own board members are throwing her under the bus. Jenkins already signed a statement saying it was her idea to cut the lock and order the tow." I chuckled. Classic Karen. Turns out control doesn't come with loyalty. Ben exhaled. "We're still cataloging everything from the Jeep. The tracker was damaged but not destroyed. We recovered the camera feed, two pretty clear footage of her walking up, cutting the padlock, and waving the tow driver in like she's running a military op." I couldn't help grinning, and here I thought she only used that clipboard for issuing citations. Ben paused for a moment before adding, "You know, Mike, technically you could press charges for property damage and trespassing, but the feds already have enough to bury her for obstruction. Your call." "I'll think about it," I said. "I'm not after revenge, Ben. I just want her off everyone's backs." "Fair enough," he replied. "Oh, and one more thing, your Jeep's fine. Once we finish evidence extraction, we'll release it back to you." "Good to hear," I said. "Just maybe disinfect the steering wheel. I don't want any traces of entitlement on it." Ben laughed. "Will do." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: relief. Real deep soul-level relief. Karen had always made me feel like I was living under surveillance, constantly waiting for the next complaint letter. Now the tables had turned, and she was the one facing scrutiny. But even as the investigation tightened around her, Karen couldn't stop herself. 2 days later, I was driving back from the hardware store when I saw her standing outside the HOA office talking animatedly to a small crowd of residents. Somehow she'd slipped past the federal seal tape. She was still in her pastel pink suit, but now it was wrinkled, her hair frazzled, her expression unhinged. A local news van was parked nearby, camera rolling. "I am the victim here," she shouted. "This is my community. I was doing my duty. That man," she pointed straight at me, voice trembling with fury, "he tricked me. He planted that car here to make me look bad." The reporter turned toward me, curious. "Sir, would you like to comment?" I smiled politely. "Sure. I'd just like to point out that I was 200 miles away when she broke into my property. I have receipts and video timestamps." Karen's eyes widened. "He's lying." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "the FBI might disagree." The crowd murmured, and the reporter's cameraman zoomed in. Karen's face went from red to white in seconds. She spun around and stormed off toward her car, an oversized white Lexus that ironically she'd fined another resident for parking slightly crooked last year. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. The footage of her meltdown was enough. That evening, every local channel aired it under the headline, "HOA President Claims Entrapment After Federal Scissor," and once the internet got hold of it, there was no going back. By the end of the week, Karen Whitmore had become a meme. People edited her picture next to movie posters, replaced famous lines with HOA-themed quotes. "You can't handle the curb appeal, and I am the law of this cul-de-sac." Even late-night comedians picked it up. But karma wasn't done yet. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, 2 agents were standing there, Ben and a woman from the district attorney's office. "Morning, Mike," Ben greeted. "Mind if we step in?" "Not at all." They came in, and the DA handed me a folder. "We've concluded the first phase of the investigation. The HOA president, Mrs. Whitmore, is being charged with destruction of federal evidence, obstruction of justice, and unauthorized seizure of property." "That's quite a resume," I said dryly. The DA smiled. "You also have the option to join as a plaintiff for civil damages. Given the property intrusion and emotional distress, it's your right." I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No, I think she's punished enough. The court of public opinion has already handed her a life sentence." Ben nodded approvingly. "You're a better man than most," maybe I said. "Or maybe I just like seeing karma do the paperwork for me." They laughed, and after they left, I walked outside, breathing in the warm desert air. The sky was gold, the world finally quiet again, but Karen's downfall still echoed through the neighborhood. HOA members resigned in droves. Residents started a petition to dissolve the old board entirely and elect a new one. For once, everyone agreed on something. Clearwater Estates didn't need a dictator, it needed decency. That weekend, the community held a public meeting. I showed up mostly out of curiosity. The room buzzed with chatter until Carl, the retired Army vet, stood up and cleared his throat. "Folks," he said, "I think we can all agree that we got carried away with rules and lost sight of what matters: neighbors, not power. And I think we owe Mike here a round of applause." The room erupted. People clapped, some even cheered. I wasn't the type to bask in attention, but I smiled and nodded. "Thanks," I said. But honestly, I just wanted to live in peace. If we're going to rebuild this HOA, let's make it about community, not control. After the meeting, I walked home under the starlit sky. My porch light glowed softly, my repaired gate stood tall, and best of all, my Jeep was back in its place, spotless and whole. As I looked at it, I thought about Karen probably sitting somewhere fuming in silence, wondering how everything slipped away. In truth, it wasn't bad luck, it was arrogance. And arrogance always finds its own punishment. Karen's downfall wasn't quick, it was spectacular. The kind that played out in slow motion for everyone to witness, each new revelation stacking on top of the last like bricks in her own tomb. Within a week, she went from being the untouchable HOA president of Clearwater Estates to a walking headline. The media couldn't get enough of her. Local stations called her the most overzealous HOA president in Arizona, while national outlets ran segments titled, "When Homeowners Associations Go Too Far." It didn't help that the footage from the HOA lot, her shouting at federal agents trying to justify cutting a lock and towing a Jeep, was public record. Someone on the task force leaked a still image of her mid-yell finger jabbing toward the camera. It became the internet's favorite reaction meme for weeks, but while everyone else laughed, I kept my distance. I'd spent too many years watching people's lives collapse under their own bad decisions to enjoy it too much. Justice wasn't supposed to be entertainment, it was supposed to be balance. Still, balance has a funny way of showing up with a sense of humor. One Thursday morning, I was out in the yard fixing my fence when I saw a moving truck pulling into Karen's driveway. The HOA house, her pride and joy with its perfectly trimmed hedges and pastel shutters, looked oddly lifeless. Curtains drawn, mailbox overflowing. The grass had started to yellow from neglect. The driver got out, looked around, and shrugged. "You know where this stuff's going?" he asked. Before I could answer, a car rolled up Ben Carter again in his unmarked SUV. He gave a small wave. "Morning, Mike. Didn't expect to find you playing handyman." "Morning, Ben," I said. "You here to deliver more poetic justice?" He grinned. "Sort of. Thought you might want to know Karen officially resigned from the HOA board yesterday." I raised an eyebrow. "Resigned voluntarily?" "Well, after her lawyer realized the fines she imposed over the years could classify as misuse of power, she didn't have much of a choice. The residents voted to dissolve the board temporarily. County mediation's coming in to help set up a new one." "Good," I said, hammering a nail into place. "Maybe now we can finally have neighborhood barbecues without needing a permit." Ben laughed. "Also, she took a plea deal." That made me stop. A plea deal? Yeah. Obstruction and tampering reduced to misdemeanor charges in exchange for community service and restitution. She'll also have to attend a course on ethical conduct and leadership. I stared at him, blinking. "They make classes for that." "Oh yeah," Ben said dryly. "Mostly full of politicians and ex-HOA presidents." I snorted. "Guess she found her people." Ben smirked. "You should have seen her face when the judge read out the condition that she's banned from serving on any HOA board for 10 years. 10 years, I said. "That's mercy." She begged for probation instead. The judge told her, quote, "You've already proven you can't handle power responsibly." That one made me laugh out loud. Now that's poetic justice. Ben nodded. "Anyway, I thought you'd appreciate the closure. The Jeep's officially released. You can pick it up at the impound whenever you're ready." I smiled. "Appreciate it, Lieutenant." When he left, I looked back toward Karen's house. Movers were hauling out boxes labeled HOA Files Photo Archives and amusingly meeting minutes 2012, 2025. Her empire reduced to cardboard and duct tape. Later that afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I walked across the street just as one of the movers dropped a small binder. It popped open, scattering papers onto the sidewalk. I bent down to help. Inside were color photos of neighbors' lawns, cars, fences, every petty infraction Karen had documented for over a decade. My Jeep appeared at least 6 times. Each photo labeled with the same angry handwriting: non-compliant, unsightly, rule violation. The level of obsession was unreal. I gathered the papers and handed them back to the mover. "You can keep those," I said. "They're not worth anything anymore." He nodded, eyes wide. "Lady must have lived for this stuff." "Yeah," I replied quietly. "And now it's living without her." That night I took a drive out past the edge of town, just me and the Jeep. The desert stretched out under the moonlight, endless and calm. I rolled down the windows, feeling the warm wind on my face, and for the first time since moving into Clearwater Estates, I felt completely free. When I got home, I found a letter taped to my gate. For a split second, my stomach sank, thinking it might be another HOA warning. But when I looked closer, it wasn't from Karen. It was from the newly formed interim committee. Dear Mr. Thompson, we would like to extend our gratitude for your patience and professionalism throughout recent events. You've been a model resident during an incredibly difficult time. Several neighbors have suggested that you join the new advisory board to help rebuild our community with fairness and transparency. We'd be honored to have your input. Sincerely, Clearwater Estates Interim Committee. I stared at the letter for a long moment, half amused, half humbled. Me, on the HOA board. The irony was almost too rich. The next morning, I attended the first meeting, mostly out of curiosity. About 20 residents gathered in the clubhouse. No clipboards, no accusatory stares, just people who genuinely wanted to make the place better. Carl chaired the meeting. All right, folks, he said. First order of business, let's make sure everyone here remembers why we're doing this. We're neighbors first, rule enforcers second. There was a round of applause. I sat in the back, sipping my coffee, and couldn't help smiling. When Carl spotted me, he gestured. Mike, you got anything to add? I thought for a moment. Yeah, I said finally. Just one thing. Let's make sure we never have another Karen. The room erupted with laughter and cheers. For the first time, Clearwater Estates felt like a neighborhood again, alive, human, imperfect, but real. Later that day, as I walked back home, I saw Karen's Lexus drive by slowly. She glanced at me from behind dark sunglasses, face tight, lips pressed thin. For a moment, our eyes met. No words exchanged, just that cold, familiar pride, still flickering beneath defeat. I gave her a polite nod, nothing more. She sped off, leaving a faint cloud of dust behind. I whispered to myself, good riddance. As the sun set over the desert hills, I sat on my porch again, watching the Jeep gleam under the golden light. The wind rustled through the palm trees, carrying the faint sound of children playing down the street, a sound I hadn't heard here in years. And for the first time in a long while, Clearwater Estates finally felt like home. A few months passed, and life in Clearwater Estates finally settled into a rhythm that felt normal. No more weekly violation notices. No more gossip over who had the wrong shade of mailbox paint. The HOA had gone from a dictatorship to a democracy, one where people actually waved at each other again instead of hiding behind blinds. Karen's name had practically become a cautionary tale. Parents would whisper to their kids, "Be nice, or you'll turn into a Karen." Even the local paper ran an editorial titled, "The Tyranny of the HOA Queen," and how a Jeep ended it. It made me laugh out loud when I read it. As for me, I'd been enjoying peace for the first time in years. My mornings were spent tuning up the Jeep, my afternoons, building a new shed, and my evenings watching the sunset with a glass of bourbon. But peace has a funny way of feeling temporary. One afternoon, I got a call from Ben Carter again. Mike, he said, thought you'd want an update. Oh, what's the latest? Did Karen sue the United States government yet? He chuckled. Not quite. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was acting in good faith under community authority. The judge wasn't impressed. I leaned back in my chair, smiling. Let me guess, dismissed worse, Ben said. The court ordered her to pay restitution to the HOA for misusing member funds during her presidency. Apparently, she'd been spending thousands on administrative retreats and beautification projects that were just excuses to wine and dine. Board members. I laughed. Of course she did. She couldn't resist mixing corruption with control. She's also been assigned 200 hours of community service, Ben continued. Guess where they're putting her? Please tell me it's not the HOA. Nope, he said with a grin I could hear through the phone. She's volunteering at the county vehicle impound lot. I burst out laughing so hard I nearly spilled my drink. You're kidding me. I wish I was, Ben said, laughing too. Poetic, isn't it? Every day she's surrounded by towed vehicles. And rumor has it, she flinches every time she sees a black Jeep. I had to wipe tears from my eyes. That's divine justice, Ben. Figured you'd appreciate that, he said. Anyway, thought you'd want the update. Case closed officially. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a while, letting the satisfaction wash over me. Not the vengeful kind, just the clean, quiet satisfaction of seeing the world right itself. But justice wasn't only served through courts. It came through transformation. The new HOA board, now rebranded as Clearwater Community Council, was a completely different beast. Gone were the fines and the constant surveillance. They replaced the old rulebook with something simpler: respect your neighbor, respect your property, and resolve problems like adults. I even got roped into helping out as a consultant for security and ethics. Me, the guy who once got fined for dirty tires. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. During our first big event, a community picnic by the lake, the atmosphere was pure joy. Kids played soccer on the grass. Neighbors grilled burgers. Someone brought a karaoke machine. and even Carl, the army vet, belted out a rough but heartfelt rendition of Sweet Caroline. As I was manning the grill, a woman approached me, short, kind eyes, probably in her early 40s. "You're Mike Wright, the Jeep guy," I smiled. "That's what they call me." "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "I've lived here 7 years. Karen once fined me $200 because my wind chime was too reflective. I almost sold my house because of her. But after everything you did standing up to her, I decided to stay." Her words hit me deeper than I expected. I didn't really do anything I said. She just did it all to herself. Maybe, she replied. But someone had to let the truth catch up to her. That line stuck with me the rest of the evening. As the sun began to set, I looked around at the laughter, the friendships, the sense of community slowly rebuilding. For the first time since moving here, Clearwater Estates didn't feel like a battlefield, it felt like home. Still, I couldn't help but wonder about Karen, where she was now. Whether she'd learned anything, or if she was just waiting for another chance to claw back control somewhere else. A few days later, I got my answer. I was driving through the industrial district, picking up supplies for a project, when I spotted her wearing an orange safety vest standing beside a chain-link fence. She was handing clipboards to a group of other community service workers, right outside the county impound lot. I slowed the Jeep and rolled down the window. Her head turned. Our eyes met for just a second. She froze clipboard midair, her jaw tightening. I smiled and gave her a friendly wave. "Need me to move this Jeep, ma'am?" I called out. The look on her face was priceless, a cocktail of rage, humiliation, and disbelief. She didn't respond. She just turned around and stomped away. I couldn't resist laughing the entire drive home. That night, sitting on my porch, I thought about everything that had happened, the lock cutting the federal agents, the viral videos, the humiliation, the aftermath. All because one woman couldn't resist controlling what wasn't hers. But in a strange way, I was grateful for it. Without Karen, none of this would have happened. The unity, the laughter, the reminder that sometimes peace has to be fought for. Later that week, I received a thick envelope in the mail. It was from the Federal Task Force, a commendation for citizen cooperation leading to the successful resolution of an active investigation. Inside was a short, handwritten note from Ben Mike. Most folks would have lost their temper. "You played it smart and let the truth do the work. Here's to justice, patience, and one hell of a Jeep, Ben." I placed the note in my desk drawer and looked out at the driveway where my Jeep gleamed in the fading light. The same Jeep that had started a war and ended one. I took a slow sip of bourbon and smiled. Justice, it turned out, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it just looked like a man, his car, and a neighborhood finally free from tyranny. It's been nearly a year since the Jeep incident, and life has never been better. The grass in Clearwater Estates grows a little wilder now, but no one minds. Kids ride bikes without being scolded for blocking the sidewalk. Neighbors wave-share coffee trade tools. The tension that used to hang in the air like barbed wire has finally dissolved. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I sit on my porch with the same black Jeep parked proudly in the driveway, the same one Karen once called unsightly. Its paint still gleams, the small scrape on the rear bumper, a faint reminder of everything that happened. I like that scratch. It's proof that peace isn't about perfection, it's about survival. The HOA has been replaced by the Clearwater Community Association, a group that actually listens to people. Carl's now the president, and every meeting starts with coffee, not complaints. Instead of fines, they organize charity drives, food festivals, and cleanup days. There's laughter again. Humanity returned. But the story of Karen Whitmore hasn't faded completely. She became an almost mythological cautionary tale, the ghost of overreach, the patron saint of pointless power trips. Kids whisper about her like she's some urban legend. If you leave your garbage can out overnight, Karen will appear with a citation. It's funny now, but it also keeps everyone humble. One Saturday morning while I was washing the Jeep, Carl walked over carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Morning, Mike. I still say that Jeep ought to have its own parking spot plaque." I laughed. "Don't tempt me. Someone might actually make one." He handed me a mug. "You know we're having a community memorial meeting next week. The idea came up to share stories about what we've learned from all this. You should speak." I shook my head. "I'm not much of a speaker." "Come on," he said. "You lived through the worst of it. You saw the cracks, and somehow made the whole neighborhood stronger. People respect you." I sighed. "All right, but don't expect a TED Talk. I'll just tell the truth." The following week, the clubhouse was packed. Families filled the folding chairs, neighbors leaned against walls, and for the first time, it wasn't about rules, it was about reflection. Carl introduced me. "Everyone knows Mike Thompson, the man who reminded us that laws don't build community, people do." Applause broke out. I cleared my throat, a little embarrassed, and walked to the small podium. Well, I began. I never thought I'd be standing up here talking about HOA drama like it's a historical event. But here we are. Laughter rippled through the room. When I moved here, I thought I was buying peace and quiet. What I didn't realize was that peace isn't something you purchase, it's something you protect. And sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought with fists or weapons, but with patience, proof, and a steady hand. People nodded. A few smiled knowingly. I used to think Karen was just a busybody with too much time. But looking back, I think she was addicted to control. That's a dangerous thing, folks. When someone believes their authority is more important than people, everything starts to rot from the inside out. She thought the rules were her weapon. Turns out they were her downfall. The room was silent. Even the kids had stopped fidgeting. I won't lie, I continued. There were moments I wanted to fight fire with fire, to yell back, to embarrass her, to tear her down. But I learned something from my years as a cop and again here as a homeowner. You can't outscream arrogance. You let it talk long enough, and it exposes itself. That's exactly what happened. A murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. I didn't need revenge, I said softly. I just needed the truth to do its job. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Some people even stood up. It wasn't pride, I felt it was relief. The chapter was finally closing properly this time. Afterward, a few folks came up to shake my hand. A young couple I'd never met before said they'd just moved in because they'd heard Clearwater Estates was different now. I told them they were right, it was. Later that night, as I walked home under the starlit sky, I thought about how everything had changed since that morning I found my gate lock cut. It felt like a lifetime ago. And then a strange sight caught my eye. Parked down the street outside an empty house for sale was a small white sedan. Behind the wheel sat a woman wearing sunglasses, staring at the homes. For a second, my stomach twisted. It couldn't be. I walked closer. The car pulled away slowly. I caught a glimpse of the driver, perfectly styled, blonde bob lips pressed thin. Karen. She didn't stop. Didn't wave. Just drove off into the night, the taillights fading into the dark. I watched her go, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. Some people never change. Others just run from their lessons. But me, I'd already learned mine. When I got back to my porch, the Jeep sat there gleaming under the porch light, stoic and unbothered. I chuckled. Guess you scared her off again, old friend. I poured myself a drink and leaned back in my chair, the cicadas humming their endless desert song. The stars shimmered above, vast and indifferent, and I realized that everything, every absurd, dramatic, hilarious part of this saga had led to peace. And that's the real twist. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms or headlines. It comes from surviving, standing tall, and watching the storm pass while you're still standing. As the night deepened, I thought of all the people out there still fighting their own Karens, the ones who think they're powerless because they're just one voice against authority. I wanted them to know the truth. Power doesn't come from titles or clipboards or rules written in fine print. It comes from patience, integrity, and the courage to stay calm while the world loses its mind. And with that, I raised my glass toward the Jeep, the stars, and the quiet world that had finally earned its peace. Here's to the calm after the storm, I said softly, and to never letting another Karen cut the lock again. In the end, I learned that control without compassion always leads to collapse. The people who crave power the most are often the least prepared to handle it. Karen's fall wasn't about one lock or one Jeep. It was about pride, ego, and the illusion that authority equals respect. Respect isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn through fairness and decency. I could have fought back with anger, but patience proved far stronger. When you let arrogance dig its own grave, justice doesn't just arrive, it echoes. To anyone watching who's ever dealt with their own HOA nightmare or power-hungry neighbor, stay calm, stay smart, and document everything. Truth is a slow weapon, but it never misses. If you enjoyed this story, share where you're watching from in the comments and tell me your craziest HOA or Karen experience. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because trust me, the next story, it's even wilder.